Today, we are used to admiring the achievements of modern engineering. Amazing bridges and skyscrapers, majestic temples and perfectly smooth highways, and simply beautiful mansions catch our eye. And many amazing inventions we take for granted, such as smartphones, race cars, and even spaceships. Meanwhile, the technology that allowed scientists and engineers to create these and other benefits of civilization, a power of 200 or 300 years, and much only in the projects, was the famous Leonardo da Vinci. However, only the described history of mankind is about 5,000 years old. It turns out that all the rest of the time people lived in darkness and dugouts? Of course it is not so, and it is proved by artifacts of ancient civilizations, one of which is ancient Egyptian. In fact, far from only ancient Egypt had a pra-civilization. Many scholars agree that it was spread all over the world. And these are not empty assumptions and hypotheses. Traces of ancient masters are indeed found all over the world, in India and in South America, and even on the former territory of the Soviet Union. As for ancient Egypt, here everything is much more obvious because, as if on the palm of your hand, are monuments of the ancients, to explain the existence of which simply using slaves is extremely difficult. In principle, the artifacts are also better preserved there due to the special climate. Moisture is known to be the main destroyer of buildings and structures, and Egypt has a very dry climate. There are so many people in the world who call themselves Egyptologists, and these people even have scientific degrees. They do recognize that the civilization that existed in ancient Egypt, under the leadership of the pharaohs, actually created amazing works of architecture. And to do so, they used the intelligence of their engineers' primitive tools based on copper and stone, and the labor of thousands upon thousands of innocently murdered slaves over decades. Perhaps this point of view has a right to life. After all, water has been sharpening the stone for thousands of years. But can it be the main one? Should we silence those mysteries that do not fit into the generally accepted theory? In fact, our science does and has always done so. From Copernicus, who was burned at the stake for dissent, to the people who laughed at Einstein and his theory of relativity. In general, it is even fair, because science must be based on something, on some pillars to go further and differentiate from pseudoscience. It just takes a long time to accumulate material and evidence, to have the courage to destroy this or that pillar. But not just to destroy it, but to put a new one in its place. So it is with the civilization in ancient Egypt. There are a lot of evidences of its existence, and nobody argues with them. Scientists agree that it is almost impossible to create much of what has already been found by the hands of slaves, and still cling to it like a straw. So, today it is increasingly said that they were no longer slaves at all, but free artisans, with great skills. But does this answer all the questions? On the contrary, it only adds new ones, and it looks like just another attempt to bury the head in the sand, kneel, before the danger of being labeled as adherents of pseudoscience and aliens. But it doesn't work that way either. In general, the civilization we are talking about is more than 3,000 years old, and maybe more, and it existed long before the emergence of the modern state of Egypt. We can even say that it has an extremely distant relation to the present-day Egyptians. On the one hand, there's nothing surprising in it if we compare it with the same Greeks, the founders of European civilization. Where are the ancient city-states and where are the modern Greeks? On the other hand, there are still a lot of questions. For example, who actually built the pyramids? The most famous structures are the Pyramid of Cheops and the Sphinx, although there are many other amazing structures. Let's start with the fact that the ruler himself with such a name had nothing to do with the creation of this construction. It turned out recently, and it was clearly built long before the appearance of Cheops in the world. The latter was exclusively engaged in the erection of temples around the famous pyramid. Recall that this majestic structure, a height of 150 meters, consists of 2.5 million stone blocks. As for the Sphinx, it is not clear at all by whom, why, and when this colossus was erected. At least the information about it is very vague. And in general, what kind of a beast is depicted? A lion with a human face. There is, of course, a well-known legend, but it certainly does not explain how this monument could be created by the forces of ordinary people. Unless thousands of highly skilled masons did not work on it for decades, on what almost all Egyptologists agree. The burials are too secure. The cult of the afterlife appeared a long time ago, but it was the ancient rulers of Egypt who elevated it to the category of something unprecedented. All of you have probably heard that others were buried not just in gold and silver, and with everything necessary for the afterlife, and together with pets, and even wives and servants. That's how seriously the pharaohs treated the worthy existence in the world of the dead. However, this is not the most important thing. Apparently, in order to prevent all these riches from being carried away, they invented to build pyramids impregnable for contemporaries, and to hide the tombs of the greatest rulers in them. And they did it so skillfully that many even today wonder how they did it at all. Here we come to the most important thing. Although the ancient world of the Nile has left us many more mysteries, but it is the ancient Egyptian tombs, pyramids, temples, and statues that tell us about the unprecedented technologies of the past. Maybe only because they managed to be preserved so well. In general, many pyramids are as if polished from the outside, so much so that it seems as if one big chisel was used on them from above, which of course could not happen. However, even to scientists, it is very difficult to explain how practically all surface of the pyramid can be so even. Moreover, some squares in front of pyramids, which also amaze with their ideal surface, were also preserved. And even if the ancients had their own levelers, how did they manage to level hard stone like that? But that's not even the most important thing. Not only did the ancients build huge structures out of limestone, but at some point in time they started using granite. It is simply impossible to work this stone with copper, and even more so with stone tools. Moreover, there are many already separated or half-separated blocks, weighing tens of tons, cut off perfectly evenly. I wonder what the ancients used to do it with, and how were they going to extract them from the rock mass, or round holes in such blocks. It is simply impossible to imagine any technology of that time that could have allowed such a thing to happen. What do scientists say about it? Basically, nothing intelligible. A hand drill? No. They might have wanted to say something if they had not discovered tombs and sarcophagi made of quartzite, a stone of greater strength than even marble. And the products from it were made in 3 planes. For example, from such a stone, simply cut out a box or a room in the rock. Even with a modern laser, it would be very difficult to do such a thing, and no one has ever tried, because it would require a lot of energy and a device the size of a large room. After that, few scientists openly insist that such artifacts were made by hand. However, it was not a laser either. No traces of melting on the walls were also found. Everything was indeed cut without high temperatures. How, I ask you? The only option is a super-fast rotating abrasive object with hardness resembling diamond. So the ancients had the most powerful diamond-coated circular saws, technologies that are only a couple decades old, but they also needed energy, not comparable to the power of a man or an animal. Even in official ancient Egyptian history textbooks, you can find images of the so-called Dandara lights. These are objects very reminiscent of early incandescent light bulbs, and it is very difficult to explain their purpose in any other way. Moreover, there are even closed tombs in which many hieroglyphics are inscribed around these images, as if they were instructions for use. But all this would be nothing more than an assumption of some Egyptologists with developed imagination, if it were not for a few buts. Firstly, many ancient authors, including famous philosophers, often visited Egypt simply because it was considered at that time to be a citadel of education. And there is their written evidence that the premises were illuminated without the use of open fire. And in one of the temples, artificial light was not extinguished for hundreds of years. If we believe the ancient authors, of course. However, there is more tangible evidence that even the classical history of ancient Egypt cannot explain. Scholars agree, for example, that some closed tombs have no soot on the ceiling. However, they discount the fact that most of them belong to that strange period of time when the Egyptians had hard stone technology for a while. But what does soot on the ceiling have to do with it, you may ask? The reason is that the tombs of the pharaohs were inscribed with elegant and complex drawings which could be drawn only when inside the room, that is, when the tomb was already ready. However, it is simply impossible to draw such a picture without lighting, so the ancient masters used oil lamps and torches which left soot on the ceilings. And here it turns out that not everywhere. What is the explanation for its absence? Did the artists paint blindly, or did they use some other light sources? For example, lanterns with a snake inside, which scientists interpret as a description of an arc discharge. By the way, real batteries were found in those places. Several vessels inside each other, made of different metals, soldered together. When acid is added, they do produce electric current, even today. However, not enough to create an arc discharge. No matter how much modern scientists would like to, but they have not yet managed to explain the construction technologies of the ancient Egyptians by the classical theory. Moreover, these technologies appeared and disappeared quite suddenly, and miracle tools and devices have not been found. Is this not a reason to think about whether we have not been visited by extraterrestrial civilizations? In fact, why not? No one has conclusively proven that we are the only living and intelligent beings from the universe. On the contrary, most theories suggest just the opposite. Extraterrestrial intelligence must exist. And it is possible that everything is much more prosaic. After all, it is only the recorded history of mankind 5,000 years, but man exists much longer, tens and hundreds of thousands of years. And during this period, more than one civilization could be born and die, even with the prefix super. There is a lot of evidence of this all over the world. The huge iron pillars in India, which have not rusted for thousands of years, and no one can repeat this technology. And it is certainly not known who exactly made them. But that's another story.